This lesson is a little bit math.
It is complicated. It's a very complicated system.
And a little bit history.
I was there. I can tell you exactly what happened.
We'll start here. How Texas public schools are funded.
It's really a equal share on behalf of the state of Texas as well as the local taxation or property taxpayers.
Public schools get money from the state and from local property owners through property tax. Each has its own formula. In state funding, there's something called a basic allotment.
And that is, in essence, the funding that is guaranteed per pupil to every district, across every campus in the state.
That dollar amount is $6,160 per student. The basic allotment does not change year after year, even if costs do. The last time the amount was adjusted by the state was in 2019. The allotment is not given to schools based on how many students are enrolled, but rather how many students show up.
It's called ADA, average daily attendance. It's basically the number of students on average that come to school each and every day. That's how school districts receive their funding.
In addition to the basic allotment, there are weights. Those weights mean the dollar amount goes up in some cases.
Some students that have special needs cost more to educate than others. For example, there will be a career technical education weight that is a little bit more than, say, your general education weight because of the materials, the cost of equipment. It's just a more expensive program to run.
So now we have basic allotment plus weights plus property taxes. But property taxes paid within a school district don't always stay within that district.
You've probably heard a lot about the Edgewood cases.
Here comes the history.
I was there for the walkout in '68. I started teaching when there was no monies in Edgewood.
Diana Herrera was a teacher in Edgewood ISD for 30 years. She was a junior at Edgewood High School in 1968 when roughly 450 students walked out of class, demanding more equitable school funding. The fight began, Diana says, when Edgewood students who wanted to go to college realized they didn't meet the requirements.
So as they start looking into it, they find that many of our teachers were not degreed. Many of them were not certified.
School facilities were also lacking.
No hot water, no fans, the library was minimally used, poor science labs, and on and on and on and on.
An Edgewood parent, Demetrio Rodriguez, seen here with his sons, filed a lawsuit. He's standing in front of Edgewood Elementary, where the top floor was closed because rain and bats would find their way in. That lawsuit led to the creation of MALDEF.
The Mexican-American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and it was started here in San Antonio in 1968.
The same year as the student walkout.
And then at that point in '68, they were going to cross U.S. Highway 90. So by that time, the SAPD is around, but to our great satisfaction, SAPD were Edgewood grads. Many of the police officers were Edgewood grads. So what they did is they held back traffic on Highway 90 and let these kids walk by and cross over. As soon as they cross over, the Edgewood main office is there.
There was a federal court lawsuit back in 1968 through 1973, which really was Edgewood compared to Alamo Heights, and then expanded to look at the whole state, poor districts versus rich districts.
Ultimately, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Texas school funding. Then came 1984 and a different lawsuit. Despite the passage of roughly 2 decades, the suit dealt with a lot of the same issues.
Their schools, the physical buildings were in worse shape than the other schools, that they didn't have enough teachers. They had too many teachers on emergency certificates. And to make it even worse, these poor districts generally had more students who cost more to educate. I worked on it from 1984 to 2002, went to the Texas Supreme Court 4 times.
The lawsuit was Edgewood ISD versus Kirby, the state's education commissioner at the time. In 1989, the Texas Supreme Court ruled in favor of Edgewood.
So the Texas Supreme Court found that this system was not efficient. It wasted a lot of state money. It was not equalized, didn't give equal rights to students in poor districts and rich districts, and therefore it violated the Texas Constitution.
But the court didn't tell lawmakers how to fix those violations. Some changes were made,
which did put some more money into the system, but didn't really equalize.
so MALDEF filed another lawsuit.
We call it Edgewood 2 sometimes.
There was even a 3 and a 4 until 1995.
And basically in 95 was the first time the legislature came up with a system that the Texas Supreme Court approved of.
And that's recapture.
And that was recapture, yes.
The process of recapture is still used by the state of Texas today, though now it's called excess revenue. It puts schools into 2 categories, those that must spread the wealth and those that need some of that money. Schools that have what the state deems an excess must send the money back to the state, and then Texas redistributes it. It's a system that's been dubbed Robin Hood by some. To calculate how much money a district must send back, the state compares a district's property tax revenue to what's called its entitlement. Remember that previous math we did, basic allotment plus weights? That's entitlement. It's the dollar amount the state says a school district is entitled to based on its student population and needs. But property owners have to pay their share first. The difference between entitlement and property tax revenue is how much money the state gives a district. But if property tax revenue is more than the entitlement amount, that's an excess, and that difference goes back to the state. A difference is what Diana noticed once recapture was put in place, thanks to the Edgewood lawsuit.
I saw the first degree PE coach, the first degree librarian. We had never had a degree librarian. The first degree reading teacher, the first degree dyslexic teacher. We had never had a dyslexia teacher ever.
So what does recapture look like on the flip side? Well, let's look at Alamo Heights ISD, for example, a local district that Edgewood parents began looking at all those decades ago. In 2022, Alamo Heights had a recapture amount of nearly $34 million. That was nearly 47% of the district's property tax revenue. More than 30 years after the landmark outcome of the Edgewood ISD lawsuit, questions about the future of Texas public school funds are still swirling. School voucher plans, unfunded safety mandates from the state, property tax compression, and more.
Why are we not adequately funding and especially supporting our classroom teachers in particular with appropriate funding when we know that the funding is there?
They continue to demand and mandate, and yet they continue to cut.
Hello, everybody. Stefania Jimenez here. Thank you so much for watching KSAT's YouTube channel. Keep up to date with all of San Antonio's top news, weather, and so much more by clicking the like and subscribe buttons below. And once again, thanks for watching KSAT.